Welcome to the St. Johns County Public Library System. I am Carla Day and I am the Young Adult Librarian here at the Bartram Trail Branch. Today we are going to be making a scrunchie. A scrunchie is basically just a casing. Now you asked me what is a casing, and a casing is just a piece of fabric or ribbon or something like that that you put on a garment to insert elastic through, or like a drawstring. If you've ever had a pair of sweatpants or a drawstring purse or something like that, this is based on that same principle. So that's basically what we're doing today. So if you got a kit from the library, you should have gotten a piece of cloth. It's 4 inches by about 20 to 22 inches. If you're cutting out your own at home, any length, say 4 inches to 18 by 20, anything along that line is just fine. Besides your piece of cloth, you will need some straight pins, and I taped those to a little piece of card for you so that those would not come apart in your bag. You should have 2 safety pins. Most people got a bigger one and a smaller one, but I did kind of run out of the smaller one, so you may have 2 the same size. And you will need a 9-inch piece of elastic is what I have here, and we'll go into that later when we get to that point. And you should have a bobbin of white thread. So if you have all of that, that's great. If you don't, something to think about if you're cutting your own fabric, and if you watched this another time, you may already know this, but if you are cutting out your own fabric, just make sure that you use sewing scissors, and that you take your scissors and use the back of your scissors so that your cut goes from the back of your scissors all the way down. I'll do that from another angle. So. And what this is going to do for you is to give you a much straighter cut than if you just did this. This is very crooked when you do it this way. So enough of that. So now I'm going to go ahead and take my piece of fabric and we are going to press under about 1/2 inch on one end. Now you're right now on the ironing board, the wrong side is up and the pretty side is down. So you're going to put it with the right side down, fold up to where you have just a tiny piece of the right side on the wrong side, and you're going to press under 1/2 inch. And what this is going to do is that whenever we put a pin to draw this through, and that will make more sense in a few minutes, it's going to keep our fabric from stretching out and ripping, and just make it easier so that whenever we get to the last step, you'll have a nice edge, that when you sew it closed, you're going to have a nice edge instead of a raw edge. So the next step that is, you are going to take your fabric, once you have that fold in, and you're going to pin it together. Just fold it in half the long way. This is right sides together. So when you get done, you're going to have the wrong sides here, and you're going to take those straight pins, and I have one I've already pinned here, so you are going to take the straight pins and put one at each end and one in the middle and a couple in between your 2 pieces. So you're going to pin here and here and here and here, but start at your ends, and then you pin your middle, and then pin the 2 in the middle. And we are going to pause for just a second, because at this point we need to get out our sewing machine. So we'll see you again in a moment. Welcome back to the library sewing program. The next step is we are going to sew down this long strip of fabric that we just pinned together. And we are not going to be sewing the short sides together at this point. We're just going to be making a straight seam. And I chose to do about 1/4 inch seam down this side, but all we're going to do is a straight seam. So we are going to go ahead and sew that seam right now. One thing to keep in mind is that whenever you get to the end of your seam, make sure that you stop with this little piece right here up, whenever you pull your thread out and cut it, because that is going to keep your needle threaded for when we do the next step of sewing that we'll come back to. But for now, let's go ahead and sew this seam. When we get to the end, we're going to, however you back stitch on your machine, let's go ahead and do that. And mine is done by pressing down on this lever. Okay, then we're going to lift our lever up. We are going to make sure that this is up. And we are going to pull this straight out, and we're going to go ahead and clip our threads. Okay, the next step is that we are going to take our elastic, and if you have a smaller pin, you're going to, what we are going to do at this point is we are going to pin the end of our elastic to our folded under seam there. We're going to pin it on there just through the one layer. You don't want it to go all the way through, because what we are going to be doing is we are going to turn this right side out, because right now it is the wrong side out. So we're going to pin, so it's pinned like that, and we are going to tuck this pin into the middle, and we are going to feed it up through our cloth. So just keep pushing it. Okay, so now we have our pin through the end. And we're going to it's a little tight. Okay, so that end's going to pull through like that, and you're going to have a tube. Mine is a little bit wrinkled, but that's okay. It's going to come out. I'm going to kind of take it and even it up a little bit. That's our raw edge. So that might make a little bit more sense as to why we doubled up on our elastic. Okay, so here we have our tube. I'm going to just kind of work with it. Roll it through. Take my finger, I'm kind of taking my fingers and kind of straightening that seam a little bit. Okay, so now we have our elastic pinned here. I'm actually going to unpin that for a minute. If your pin is the same size, then don't worry about this. But what I'm going to do now is I am going to take a pin, and on that pressed under part, I am going to pin one end of my elastic. Now, before we do that, we do need to talk about how long to make your elastic. So in my case, it depends on where you want to wear your scrunchie. If you're going to wear it in your hair, you might want to go ahead and safety pin the ends together and see if it's how you want it in your hair. You're not going to have it through here, so just keep in mind that that sticking it through the cloth is going to make it need to be just a little bit longer. In my case, this is 9 inches, I ended up cutting off about 1 inch for the length that I wanted mine. But I wanted to give you a little bit extra just in case you had really thick hair or you wanted to wrap it around your wrist twice or something like that. Also, if you wanted to tie it in a knot instead of sewing it, leaving it longer will make it easier to tie that knot if you decided to do that, if you decided to do a square knot instead of sewing it at the end. So once you've decided how long you want your elastic to be, let's go ahead and find that folded under end, and what we're going to do is pin one end of the elastic on one side of that tube. It doesn't really need to be done carefully, you just need to do it in such a way that it will hold. And then we are going to take our other pin and we're going to feed it through the tube again. And I'm actually kind of putting it through that way. So we're going to take this, and this way we don't have to hold on to that end of elastic whenever we're trying to feed it through there. So I'm going to take this, so here I've got that elastic, I've got the pin through there and it's pinned to the elastic. I'm going to take the other end and feed it through that tube. And this is actually a little bit easier than the first part was. I'm kind of taking that pin on the seam, and that's kind of helping me push that seam out a little bit. But you don't have to do that, you're basically just feeding it through, but that just helps our scrunchie be a little bit neater, but entirely not necessary. As you can see, the elastic is gathering up our scrunchie, and this is starting to look like a scrunchie. So now we have our elastic, and try to make sure that this is not twisted. I'm going to match up. Okay, so I have all the way down, I have my seam on the top there, seam's on the top here, seam is on the top there, so I'm good. Okay, so I'm going to very carefully unpin this side of elastic and pull it through. And over here, I'm going to unpin this pin, but you have to keep hold of it. The worst thing that's going to happen is you let go of it and you just have to thread it again. It's not the end of the world. But I've got both ends of my elastic here, and I'm overlapping it about ½ inch to 1 inch. And I'm going to make sure, okay, I've got the seam side up, I've got the seam side up over there. Okay, so I'm going to take a straight pin. Okay, I'm going to take a straight pin where that's overlapped. And you, like I said, you could also knot this instead of sewing this if you would like to, and that will work as well. But I'm going to put a straight pin to hold this where it's overlapped for a minute. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I am going to put the pin and all, and this is we're not going to sew over the pin, but this is just so that we can have something to keep it down while we're trying to get it in there, because it's kind of hard to feed under there. So now I've got the overlapped elastic under there, and I've got a pin. Now the next thing that I'm going to do, and I'm not quite sure how this would work on your machine, but on my machine, I look over here and there's letters that show me where the different seams are, and I want to do a zigzag seam, and I see this C on my machine is my zigzag stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that over to C. I'm going to very carefully take my pin out. Right now that presser foot is holding it together for me, and hopefully I don't lose it, because this is tricky, so you may, so that works. So I've got this overlapped. So I'm going to go ahead and zigzag over my elastic, and then I'm going to back stitch over it again. So that is a little bit tricky. Okay, so I've got that stitched together. I'm going to take it out. Before I cut off my thread, I want to make sure that this is up, so that because I'm going to sew again in a moment, and I don't want to have to rethread my machine. So that's up there. I'm going to pull this out, and I'm going to clip my threads. So the elastic is now sewn together. If you wanted to, you could go ahead and check and make sure it's the length you want, but I'm not going to do that right now. So I now have, this is my side that is ironed under, so I'm going to put my raw edge on the other side. I'm going to go ahead and tuck that raw side under my ironed under part. I'm going to feed that under there, and I'm going to give it a little bit of room so that I make sure that it is caught. So let's see, I've still got some raw seam that's not inside there, so I'm making sure that I'm going to stick this side inside of this side. Maybe that's the easiest way to put it. Okay, matching up my seams. And okay, I think that's good. So I'm going to go ahead and put a couple of pins in there to hold it together while I stitch. And you can decide at this point if you want the elastic on the top or the bottom, but it really doesn't matter. Wherever your elastic is, it's okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a pin to hold there and a pin here to hold these together. Okay, now, so that's ready to sew, and I'm going to just sew a narrow seam, maybe 1/4 of an inch in, and just make sure that however much you've overlapped, that you're going to catch that in a seam. Now, this is very important. Remember to put your machine back on your straight stitch. So on mine, that's the A, so I'm going to move this over to A, and so I'm going to straight stitch this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and lower that. Take out my pin. Get over there. Okay, then I'm going to back stitch a little bit there at the end. And okay, I'm going to take that out. And okay, let's make sure so that the next time I go to use this, I don't have to rethread it. So that is sewn together. And oh, got some more threads there. Clip all of my threads to make that neat. And we have now sewn a scrunchie. So thank you very much for coming to the library and sewing with us today. Please make sure to keep up with us on our Facebook page. And also, we also have a YouTube page that you can keep up with. And Please remember that the library is open. You can come into the library and check out books. You can also put books on hold and call whenever they're ready if you would like to do curbside service. And again, thank you for coming to the library.